And we now move under section 38, Standing Order 38, the Standing Order. We call on MaryLouMcDonald to begin leaders' questions. Thank you, Deputy.
Taoiseach, there is an immediate need for you to intervene to end the delay in evacuating very sick and injured children from Gaza to Ireland for urgent medical treatment. Last year, as you know, government agreed to evacuate 30 of these children. There were 2 successful evacuations of 12 children in December and May. However, the vital evacuation of the remaining 18 children has been stopped due to bureaucratic wrangling within government departments over visas. At least 8 children were identified by the World Health Organization and the HSE for urgent medical evacuation in early June. And a month on, they're still waiting, Taoiseach. Their medical assessments are complete, the doctors are ready, the hospitals are ready to receive and treat these children, but government is stalling. Time is of the essence here. It is a matter of life and death for these children. They tried to survive a genocide being carried out before the eyes of the world. I've corresponded with both the Taoiseach and the Minister for Health to advocate for their immediate evacuation. Minister Carol McNeill tells me that she is bringing a memo to Cabinet to seek government approval for what she calls a more humanitarian approach to the evacuations, and that she fully expects, in her words, to welcome the next group of children in the autumn. That's months away, Taoiseach. That is an eternity away. The only humanitarian approach is to get these children out now. It's important that government memo doesn't solely identify Egypt as the evacuation route for these children. The Rafah crossing is closed and there is no direct route from Gaza to Cairo. Countries such as Jordan must be included. Jordan, as you know, is already facilitating evacuations and has offered to help. Every week, every day, every hour that their evacuation out of Gaza is delayed puts these children's lives at increased risk. And there is every chance that these children will be killed as they wait, while government departments push paper around, tick boxes and argue amongst themselves. That threat, that likelihood is very real, very present and very immediate for these children. We know that children from an earlier group previously identified for medical evacuation from Gaza to Ireland have died while waiting to come here in the horror of Israel's genocide. Doctors in Ireland who are standing by to treat these children, ready to save their lives, are very, very worried for them. Dr. Morgan McMonagle, a trauma surgeon who's worked on humanitarian missions in Gaza, puts the reality for these children in very stark terms. He says, by autumn, there is a very, very good chance that Gaza simply won't exist at the rate that things are going. So it's unacceptable that government put bureaucratic wrangling over the lives of very sick, injured children. A hishi, Tom Fifri the lather across the scale, agus kinshu goil na lani seo atá tin agus gurtatha, é slunathe an buinse buise ó Gaza go héireann don cruim leis atá daoí orthu. Taoiseach, the government's proposed timeframe of autumn will be too late for some or perhaps even all of these children. This is a matter of life and death. They are waiting since early June, and it's vital that you as head of government intervene, expedite their arrival in Ireland with no further delay, and I ask you to do this with urgency.
First of all, I thank the Deputy for raising this important issue. And at the outset, I have to say that one of the appalling features of the war on Gaza has been the indiscriminate slaughter of innocent children. And it has shocked the world in terms of the serial killing of children as a result of indiscriminate bombing, attacks and shootings. And the scale of injuries suffered by so many children is truly appalling. Now, we do have, as a country, a strong tradition of providing humanitarian assistance. And in September last year, following an appeal from the World Health Organization, the government did approve, of course, our participation in an initiative to evacuate a number of sick children from Gaza for treatment and care back here in Ireland. And 4 flights were agreed. 2 have been successfully carried out. So far, about 12 children in total have arrived safely to receive medical treatment, facilitated through 2 evacuations, one in December, another in May, December of last year and May of this year. Children were accompanied by 12 mother carers and 21 accompanying family members, so about 45 between adults and children would have been facilitated in, and ensuring that the available appropriate supports are in place to facilitate the paediatric patients and their families obviously is key to the success of the overall operation, and planning is ongoing for the next medical evacuation operation. There is no delay. Nothing has been stopped. There is no bureaucratic wrangling. This is not subject to any government memo. In other words, a government memo will emerge which will, in many respects, adopt an even more generous response in terms of the numbers of family members who can come, or siblings of the injured child. So the presentation of a memo is not material to the next flight. It will come through, it will regularise what's been happening already, because the original government decision had, I think, 1 child and 1 person. But actually, in practice, what we've been doing is much more than that. So the next memo, the memo that the Minister is being, will regularise all of that. Simple as that. But it's not stopping anything. And there's no one sort of saying it can't, the next flight can't happen. No one's saying that. There are obviously huge logistical issues in terms of getting children out of Gaza. And the WHO and Medevac and others are working with us in terms of coordinating that. There had been no delays in the processing of Irish entry visas in this regard. There are no current applications under this scheme awaiting processing. Okay? And the Minister is here and confirm all of that. So I would respectfully say that before making allegations and assertions, we get the facts right. And as far as I'm concerned, we will do everything we can to honour and fulfil what we've committed to, and to what we can do to help children who desperately need treatment and care, and wider supports because of the extraordinary trauma that has been visited on so many children as a result of a horrific war that has no moral justification whatsoever anymore in terms of the assault on children. We want hostages, all the hostages released. We want an end to the war in Gaza. We, as a country, will continue to provide humanitarian assistance to Gaza and to the West Bank and to all of the various agencies that support Palestinians in Jordan and Lebanon. We work with Jordan on a continuing basis. So wherever the children, there's no issue for us in terms of the particular border crossing or the particular method or mechanism, or route out of Gaza. That's not an issue for us at all.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy MacDonald.
Well, Taoiseach, no child is safe in Gaza. The Israeli genocide has mercilessly slaughtered children with abandon, and the international community has watched on. The commitment that this state and the government has made is actually a very modest one, 30 children. They should be evacuated with all due haste. My information is, and according to the medics who will treat these children, not alone have 8 children been identified by the World Health Organization and the HSE as needing urgent care, but the assessments are complete, the doctors are ready, the hospitals are ready. So if, as you say, there is in fact no bureaucratic wrangling and no blockage, why are they not here? That's my question. That's my question. My challenge to you still as Taoiseach is this. Ensure quickly that the remaining children, 8 ready to travel with full medical assessments complete, and a further 10, that those evacuations happen without any further delay. And by the way, I've been in contact with the Taoiseach, and he informed me that there was in fact a necessity of a memo to Cabinet. So I don't know what your communications is like within government. I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in the children and the need to evacuate them now for the treatment they need.
Is marrá nachhfuil to Cian leis an ólas atá agat, agus leis an méad dúir tú madan faoin cheist seo. Caidiú time darfach go méid mínas ó rialtas ag déanamh gacian iarracht na lenaí seo chóirtaisteach chotapóla is féidirling. Tá rank déanta going, tá níos móla déanta going. No, in respect of the case, you've moved on now in your second, because the earlier assertions were wrong.
They're not wrong.
They were wrong. Fundamentally
Deputy,
wrong, Deputy. I don't understand why. I understand there's no issue with raising questions and so on, but the absolute motivation on your side seems to be all the time to seek to sow doubt in terms of the bona fides of
Deputy, please.
To sow
Deputy
doubt
MacDonald.
in the bona fide of government on a fundamental humanitarian question. That is not acceptable. From the very beginning of this war, we did everything to get Irish citizens out of Gaza. Our embassies and our diplomats did everything possible to do it. Why do you think we would try and delay children coming out of Gaza? How dare you make that assertion? That is not on my agenda, and it's not on the government's agenda.
Thank you. Deputy
And the government memo is immaterial.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Time is up.
It's immaterial. We discussed this Monday evening. Tarnished to the Taoiseach with the Minister for Justice. No delay in this respect.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Ivana Bacik.
Can Corla, I want to begin by welcoming an important young visitor, Minnie McDermott, to the Visitors' Gallery today. Taoiseach, I want again today to welcome yesterday's announcement about the establishment of the Commission of Investigation into Sexual Abuse in Schools. And I want to pay tribute, as I know we all do, to the Ryan brothers, to David and the late Mark, for their bravery in stepping forward and speaking out about their experiences of abuse. We owe an immense debt to them and to all those survivors who've spoken out, who've shone a light into the dark and shameful past of abuse in schools. Their courage provided the impetus for Mary O'Toole's scoping inquiry that has now led to this commission. But Taoiseach, we must learn lessons from past investigations and inquiries, some of which we know failed to deliver truth, justice, accountability and indeed healing for victims and survivors. As a barrister, I represented survivors of abuse in court and before the Residential Institutions Redress Board in the past. And there I witnessed the deeply traumatic impact that flawed procedures can have for survivors in bringing complaints of childhood abuse. Many survivors described to me their experience of being re-traumatised by flawed and unduly complex and cumbersome processes, for example, before that board, the Redress Board in the 90s. More recently, we know the terms of reference of the Commission of Investigation into Mother and Baby Homes excluded a great many people who had suffered immensely. And in addition, when the work of the Commission was completed, its findings found their way to survivors through a leak to the press, which was unacceptable. And indeed, there's a situation now that's really unfortunate, where victims are left waiting years for appropriate redress. So, Taoiseach, we must ensure this new and welcome Commission avoids the mistakes of the past. I welcome the fact that you've spoken of an inclusive and survivor-led approach. That's vitally important. But we do also need to ensure that religious orders that were complicit in the sexual abuse of children should be required to provide appropriate redress to survivors. Survivor Louise O'Keefe told Morning Ireland today the framework is there. We must also ensure access on a timely basis to redress for survivors. And Taoiseach, I raised this with you in the Taoiseach's question session yesterday, and I raised the question of a parallel redress process. I think you might have misunderstood me, because in your reply you said it would not be possible to set up a redress scheme in advance of an inquiry. I accept that. But what we asked was that a redress scheme might run in parallel to the Commission. We're conscious the Commission is going to run for at least 5 years. And we don't believe survivors should be forced to wait a further 5 years for the outcome of the process. And Taoiseach, again, just to return to the question of redress, survivors need assurance that organisations, religious bodies, religious orders in the Church that were accountable and responsible for abuse, that they should be made to pay. Church and state, but also religious orders played a shameful role, as we know. And in particular, within religious orders, clerics were allowed, in some cases, to perpetrate appalling crimes against children with impunity. We need to go further than condemnation. We need to remove legal obstacles to pursuing religious orders. We in Labour have produced a bill to do that. Will you accept that bill and move forward, Taoiseach? And will you ensure that there is redress available to survivors within 5 years?
Well, first of all, I thank the Deputy for raising what is a very serious issue, and to say that I agree with you in terms of the work of the Ryan brothers in particular as a catalyst for the decision from Minister Norma Foley to set up the scoping inquiry originally, and Minister Helen McEntee in bringing to government yesterday proposals for the establishment of a commission of investigation into the handling of historical child sexual abuse in schools. And government agreed yesterday and to the appointment of Justice Michael McGrath, Judge of the Court of Appeal, as chair of the commission. And that was the principal recommendation of the scoping inquiry to establish such a commission. There will be a period of consultation prior to formal commencement, and the Commission is ready to hear when the Commission is ready to hear from those who wish to contribute to its work. It will be widely advertised. We've also accepted further recommendations of the scoping inquiry with regard to the remit of the Commission, to child protection issues and the legal system, and memorialisation. It's clear from the scoping inquiry that many survivors view financial redress as an important measure of accountability for those who ran schools where sexual abuse happened. And government is pursuing now in a very detailed way, very detailed examination is taking place in terms of ensuring that those responsible, including religious orders, are held accountable and to ensure that they make redress. Now, the Office of the Attorney General is examining this with the Department of Education and other relevant bodies on legal options that may be available to the state, and we are looking and examining changes to the statute of limitations on civil claims and changes to the status of unincorporated associations, as well as looking at the assets that religious orders have. And an examination of how to ensure compensation from religious orders will run in parallel with the Commission of Investigation. It is complex work. It will require detailed consideration and may take some time to complete. And we will be open to engaging with you and constructive proposals that you have on this. We are open to engaging with you on that. And back in the late 90s, we did amend the statute of limitations, but more is needed, and that's acknowledged. And fundamentally, many survivors, and some of the accounts in the scoping inquiry were quite horrific, but many of them were very clear that they wanted those who were responsible to be accountable and to contribute.
Deputy Bacik.
More than contribute.
Well, thank you, Taoiseach, and I think we all want to see those accountable to be made to contribute. And indeed, I welcome the fact that you're exploring and examining legal options. But this is not a new phenomenon. We've known about this issue for years. We have produced a bill for the Labour Party to ensure that we can pursue religious orders and unincorporated associations. I've sent you a copy, and I'll send you another copy. We need this urgently. Religious orders have, as we know, Taoiseach, for years they've been carrying out a perfectly legal practice of transferring their assets and their properties to associated lay-run trusts. I've described this as the developer's wife syndrome. That puts assets often out of reach, or in some cases, out of reach of state authorities. And it's not acceptable. As of September 2024, religious orders had paid just 16% of institutional redress costs that were owed, and we know the money is there. Religious orders involved in historic abuse sold more than 75 properties worth a total of over €90 million since 2016. We know these orders and their associated trusts own vast quantities of property and assets around the state. So we're simply asking, as survivors are asking, that they be made to pay the redress they so clearly owe to survivors who were denied justice so long.
Yes, that's the government's intention and commitment and determination to do. And those specific issues that you've raised are being examined in considerable detail with a view to enabling government to have the powers ultimately to deal with those particular mechanisms that have been used and to make sure that we can ensure the financial capacity is retained in the country and retained and made available to provide compensation.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Now we move to Deputy Cian O'Callaghan, Social Democrats.
Taoiseach, what is the government at when it comes to personal injury awards? For weeks now, we've been hearing about a memo that the Justice Minister is bringing to Cabinet concerns a review of awards by the Judicial Council, which recommended a 17% increase. Initially, it was reported the Minister was going to rubber stamp that increase. This memo was due to go to Cabinet last week. Then it was reported that it was going to go to Cabinet yesterday, and now we hear it might be next week after it first goes to a Cabinet subcommittee today. So can you tell us what is going on? Taoiseach, I shouldn't need to tell you this, but a 17% increase in awards would be absolutely disastrous. The fact that the government is even considering this is reckless. Personal injury awards in Ireland are already much higher than in other countries. Awards here can be more than 4 times that in the UK. And still we are hearing the government is contemplating jacking them up even further and increasing awards by nearly 1/5. This will have an immediate knock-on effect on insurance premiums, not just for every household, but for community groups, sports clubs and small businesses as well. Taoiseach, prices are soaring across the country. We know that grocery prices, rents, energy and transport costs are all skyrocketing, and this is putting a huge strain on households. Wherever possible, the government should be doing everything it can to reduce costs, not to further inflate them. And a 17% increase in personal injury awards would do just that, would drive insurance costs even higher, at a time when so many people are struggling to get by. Taoiseach, insurance costs in Ireland are already far too high. It's often the reason that community events end up getting cancelled. Sports clubs run by volunteers are under huge stress trying to meet constant rising costs. Costs are an extra burden on households. Motor insurance premiums are now shooting up month after month. Increasing personal injury awards will add further fuel to this inflationary fire. So why is the government even considering increasing awards? Your sole focus should be on getting insurance costs down. Taoiseach, government dithering on this issue is causing huge concern. There are now fears you're delaying a decision until the Dáil goes into recess to try to avoid Dáil's scrutiny and questioning on it. So can you level with us and give a straight answer on this, Taoiseach? Is the government going to increase personal injury awards by 17%? And will you give a commitment that you will not go ahead with this increase?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Deputy, kind of intriguing how you present the case. In one sentence you say government is going to jack up insurance awards, and on the other sentence you say we're dithering. And you're apparently urging us to bring clarity. I don't think you're urging us to bring clarity. I think you're urging us to fulfil maybe entirely the implications of the Act so that you can then start attacking government for political reasons. The reality is, it's the Oireachtas has created this situation. Like the Oireachtas provided the Judicial Council with the powers to propose amendments to the personal injuries guidelines in 2019. And then those provisions were introduced by the then Minister for Justice, Charlie Flanagan. It was supported by all parties, including Sinn Féin, I believe your own party at the time, and the Labour Party. And it had a tortured sort of progression. And what happened then, of course, the Supreme Court, if you may recall, became involved in Delaney versus the Personal Injuries Assessment Board and ours. And that essentially said, in terms of the separation of powers context, that it had to come back to the Oireachtas. If the guidelines recommended by the judiciary, the Judicial Council, were to have effect, it would need to have to be affirmatively passed by the Dáil. So again, for the interest of the public watching in, this is not something that government is kind of bringing to the Dáil to jack up prices. It's an unusual framework, to say it lightly, but the Supreme Court took a decision. But where we are though, and it was a 4-3 majority ruling and so on, so it was tight at the Supreme Court, and I observe separation of powers absolutely and believe in it. So let's have a bit of realism about the debate and clarity. To me, there's a need for a review of the Judicial Council Act 2019, and the Minister for Justice is committing now to review that Act. But the Minister also, he will bring a memo to government which will lay the guidelines before the Houses. But he won't be bringing a resolution seeking their approval. So don't believe everything in the newspapers.
Deputy.
So the Taoiseach is clarifying that there won't be an increase of 17%. You're giving that commitment to the Dáil now, that you will not be putting forward an increase of 17%. So I welcome that if that's the case, Taoiseach. Awards here are 4 times higher than in the UK, so that would be a regressive move. So if you're not doing that, that is welcome. Taoiseach, you've given a history lesson in terms of the legislation around this. But the Judicial Council Committee on this itself said that they couldn't carry out any meaningful analysis on the quantum of awards given under the guidelines to date that might inform this review. So they themselves were saying they didn't have sufficient data to be able to inform a good decision. So welcome that if you're giving a commitment, you confirmed you're giving a commitment, there will be no increase brought to the Oireachtas by government on this, on the insurance awards. You're giving that commitment.
Taoiseach to respond, please.
Yeah, I have just said it to you. It'll be laid before the House, but there will be no accompanying motion to the House to approve. But what I would say to you, this is something the Oireachtas in its entirety has to reflect on. There will be implications in that decision for the Personal Injuries Assessment Board. Because essentially now we have a vacuum here in terms of of personal injury awards. There is a legislative framework there which had to be amended because of Supreme Court decision, and which has led to a situation where the Dáil has to approve whatever the Judicial Council's recommendations are if they're to take effect. If you don't do the approval, they don't take effect. But that could lead to consequences within the courts itself and within cases that could ultimately have the impact of undermining the Personal Injuries Assessment Board. So we do need to reflect on this. I get the short-term politics. You probably would have loved if we came in and had an approval motion. And then you would have been, from the comfort of opposition, attacking us day in and day out.
Time is up.
As you say, jacking up insurance premiums.
Deputy Peadar
That was the agenda, I know it.
Deputy Peadar Toibin.
We need, as an Oireachtas, to deal with this more soberly.
William, Taoiseach, where you live in Ireland is a significant determinant of whether you will survive cancer or die from cancer. In Ireland today, counties and postcodes should have government health warnings. Now, when a cancer diagnosis happens in a family, a dark cloud descends on that family. And while there is obviously hope in terms of treatment, there's no doubt for serious cancers, every moment of the day is consumed with whether or not you're going to make it. Now, the Irish Cancer Society today has released damning information which shows significant variations with regards to access to cancer diagnostics and treatments. Life-saving chemotherapy and radiotherapy treatments are being denied patients because of where they live. Now, on Monday, I met with doctors in Letterkenny, and they told me that just 12% of cancer patients in that hospital receive treatment within the recommended 15 working day time frame. In Galway, patients are waiting 7 to 8 weeks for treatment at the moment. The National Cancer Control Programme has written to AIM2 to say that HSE is failing to meet its own radiation treatment targets. In the year up to August 24, treatment targets were met only once in Galway, only once in Cork. Cancer services in the northwest are being shut down, and cancer services in Galway, Waterford and Limerick do not have the necessary PET scanners. We have antique radiotherapy equipment breaking down. Treatment is being cancelled, Taoiseach, on a regular basis because certain scanners are breaking down over and over again. Now, Taoiseach, I've had cancer myself. I know what it's like to have cancer growing inside you. I know the stress that it creates. I know that the first thing you want to do is to get it cut out and to get chemo to zap it if you can. And I know that delayed treatments means radically worse outcomes for people. Delayed treatments means that cancer can spread throughout your body. People are dying in this country at the moment for the want of treatment. And the Irish Cancer Society has said that your government has met only one of the six targets that were set out by your government. Now, AIM2 has also discovered that there's a 12% differential between breast cancer survival rates when compared between public and private hospitals in this country. If a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer in a designated centre, there's an 85% chance of surviving. If she is diagnosed in another public hospital, there's an 81% chance of surviving. But if she is diagnosed in a private hospital, there's a 93% chance of survival. If you're actually diagnosed with breast cancer in Sweden, you're 7% more likely to survive than in this state. If you're diagnosed with breast cancer in England, you are 5% more likely to survive in this country. It's an incredible situation, Taoiseach. Now, I would ask you, when is the system going to stop dividing patients between postcodes and income? When is the HSE going to deliver cancer treatments on an equal basis throughout the country?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach, please.
First of all, I think, Deputy, balance and perspective is required in discussing this issue, and it is a very serious issue. And the government is very committed to continuing investment in cancer care and have invested hugely in cancer care in the last number of years. Up to 645 million between 2021 and 2024 alone. And new treatments such as CAR, T-cell therapy, radio-labelled therapy, and specialised radiotherapy treatments are now available for the first time in Ireland. And we have very top-class equipment now in terms of radiation and oncology, which we didn't have 5 or 6 or 7, 8 years ago. So let's not brand the entire cancer treatment system as antique. That's not fair either. And cancer survival is improving, and more people are living after cancer than ever before. Today we have over 220,000 people now in Ireland who are living with or after cancer. And I appreciate your own personal experiences and using and properly then articulating that in terms of highlighting issues, because it is an enormous pressure on an individual or a family when you have a cancer diagnosis. But that 220,000 is 50% higher than a decade ago. Okay? So that's a huge transformation. And survival rates have increased progressively over the last number of years. And that was because of the development of national cancer strategies, which have improved screening services. So if you look over the last 2 decades, our screening has expanded enormously, particularly in the breast check, in terms of cervical screening and in terms of bowel screening also. Been hugely increased staffing, increased greater access to diagnostics and survivorship programs. And the funding will continue. I won't go through all the figures in terms of those that have been recruited. On the capital funding, about 140 million has been used over the last 8 years. State-of-the-art radio-oncology facilities now in Galway, not antique, but state-of-the-art in Galway and Cork, to the new National Cervical Screening Laboratory, and various cancer infrastructure, chemotherapy wards and lab facilities across the country. And that will continue this year in terms of the Oncology Day unit at Cavan General Hospital, Tala, Kerry University Hospital, Midland Regional Hospital and Tullamore, and further chemotherapy infrastructure at Kerry, at Cork University Hospital, at Letterkenny University Hospital, and so on. And we will continue to invest. Now, on the county by county, I mean, one of the better developments of the last 2 decades was the development of proper cancer centres in the major tertiary hospitals, where the bulk of the treatment actually should occur. I'm concerned about the proliferation, again, of treatments in private hospitals, because all the experts told us that centres of excellence was the way to go. And I would appreciate greater clarity from you in respect of your assertion that 93% attending a private hospital are a better outcome than, say, I think you said, than public hospitals.
Deputy Toibin.
Because the view was, and we've done it in terms of, say, take James's the matter, Cork
30
University
seconds
Hospital.
over, Taoiseach.
We've put centres of excellence
You can come
there.
back in.
That's where people should go, actually.
Taoiseach, we don't have centres of excellence in many places. We have centres of waiting lists. And even actually the Irish Cancer Society today said we have centres of bare adequacy was the word that they used. You mentioned extra resources, but that's not keeping up with inflation. It's not keeping up with population increases. It's not keeping up with the ageing population in this country. And it's not getting to the front line in many areas of the HSE. It's getting caught up. And also, we don't have the necessary staff. We in Aintu found out that 13,000 nurses have left this country just in the last 5 years. Incredible figure. And in some years, the majority of graduating doctors are actually leaving the country. Now, cancer survival rates are thankfully increasing, but that's in large part because there's better medicines, there's better technology, and there's improved treatment, not necessarily because of the extra services that the government are providing throughout the country. Now, I want you to deal with the facts here, Taoiseach. The facts are stark. The Irish Cancer Society today say that there is a geographic determinant in relation to whether or not you get the treatment that you need on time. There are waiting lists in certain counties that are 5-6 times beyond what the targets are. People are dying as a result of that geographic difference.
Your time is up. Thank you, Taoiseach.
Deputy, I mean, first of all, we have more work to do, that's acknowledged. But your commentary, you acknowledge that there's been improvements, but you don't give any credence at all to the fact that there's been very significant investment in cancer services. The number of staff, additional staff in our health service has dramatically expanded. No, you just created an image of thousands fleeing out of the country. No, sorry. Concentrate on the increases in numbers in the health service. You can't ignore it, and you shouldn't, because it reduces your credibility, and you're making good points at one level, but using language like antique and using language like that everyone's fleeing out of the hospitals, when we have an increase after year in the numbers of staff. We've invested hugely in terms of the number of people. Well over, close to 30,000 extra people in our health service over the last 4 to 5 years. I mean, that's additional people coming in, okay? Now, in terms, I think the West, and we have issues in Galway where infrastructure is required. Further investment in Galway is required. No question in terms of that. Letterkenny, we did work on that in the Gelvin.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Which does help people in the northwest as well, both in cardiology and in cancer.
David Maxwell.
Also, which we invested in.
Thank you. Deputy David Maxwell.
Taoiseach, I want